Well, should we get started? Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Paul Whitener Gallery at Hickory Museum of Art. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm John Carfagno, and I always tell people I have the best job in Catawba County because I get to be the executive director of North Carolina's second oldest art museum. And we've been missing everybody an awful lot. We are looking forward to reopening on October the 1st. And don't think for a second that we're not wearing masks. I actually just took mine off. Debbie has hers on. Debbie Reed is our producer for the evening. She's our communications and design manager. There's her hand. Waving hello. And when we reopen, I can assure you we will be socially distanced and as safe as possible. And the paintings that we're going to look at will still be on view for a little while. I think they'll be out until October the 10th. So we have been looking in the meantime, like I said, we've been missing everyone. We've been looking forward to having a little bit of fun and enjoying a drink together and looking at some art. So I wanted to be sure while I'm in the Paul Whitener Gallery to recognize the sponsors whose annual support is celebrated in this space. We have the Beaver Family Foundation, the Broyhill Family Foundation, the Hambrick Memorial, now the Hambrick Family Foundation, and Vanguard Furniture. And interestingly, the Hambrick family was represented on our founding board. They were very active at the time of the paintings that we're going to look at today coming into the museum. So we're super grateful that they continue to be invested in our mission and our work the way that they are. So Debbie is going to switch us over to SlideShare, and there will be times when I'm asking questions, and I hope that you will feel comfortable to answer them. The real paintings are here. I get to spend time directly underneath them, but you'll get to see some reproductions when we're talking about them. And like I said, it will be a lot more fun if we talk with each other tonight. And our drink is El Presidente. I hope that you're enjoying your first few sips. We curated that to go with the evening. And it has been said that looking at great art is a lot like enjoying a cocktail. It's a lot better when you do it with a friend. So there is a historical reason why I've chosen this cocktail and that we're sharing it together tonight. But I'm going to use that as a cliffhanger to get you to come back, same bat time, same bat channel, next Thursday, when we'll hear a little bit more about the original owner of these paintings. But in the meantime, let's enjoy El Presidente and take a look at our next slide, which I'm sure some of you may recognize him. This is our founding director, Paul Whitener, looking handsome as always. And I always say, as executive director, Paul set an immeasurably high standard for everybody that came after him. He looked like a movie star. He was a great athlete, playing football at Duke, ran so fast they call him the Galloping Ghost, was an incredibly gifted painter and a visionary museum director. So I certainly don't look like a movie star, and I played a little bit of high school hockey and baseball, but not football at Duke. But we do always strive to keep Paul Whitener's energy and vision alive in these galleries, and it's really fun to be able to celebrate that tonight. In 1944, Paul famously declared that our region should have a museum that would make Hickory an art center. He believed that this community could have a world-class art museum, and he amassed a collection bringing in the types of exhibitions that would normally be seen in larger cities. And to this day, his belief in quality and excellence, like I said, is alive and well. Our team strives to ensure that his bold, innovative spirit is reflected in all that we do. So we'll raise a glass to Paul and take a look at the next slide. If your first few sips of El Presidente is not really what you're looking for, perhaps you'd want to try the hot toddy. Now, I feel very fortunate. This program has put me in touch with some people that knew Paul personally, experienced his creativity and energy, and shared with me that on an evening like tonight, kind of rainy here in North Carolina, he probably would have been enjoying a hot toddy. So this is a recipe not unlike the one that he would have had, like I said, if El Presidente is not for you. So we'll take a look at the next slide and talk a little bit about a situation that Paul Whitener found himself in 1954. Did you? Is the portrait not there?
I pulled it.
Oh, just one sec.
Little technical difficulty.
That's the artist.
Okay.
I think the version of PowerPoint is outdated.
Oh, okay. Well, picture a handsome man in a gilded frame.
The images are just not up here.
Okay. None of them?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Okay. They're all gone?
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. That might make things a little bit challenging. On all of them?
Yeah, it says it's the version of PowerPoint's outdated, and I don't know why I couldn't do this before.
Okay.
When we did the run through.
Should we switch up?
Let me close it out and see if I can get it back.
Okay. Just one second.
Okay.
There they are.
It was the same issue we had when we were in the library at that time.
Okie doke. Well, if we could just fast forward a couple slides. And for those of you at home, can we have a hand for Debbie?
Sorry.
Thank you for hanging in there. Okay, so the handsome fellow that we're looking at is a man named George A. Zabriskie. And in 1954, he passed away. And Zabriskie was well known to the museum's many friends in the art world in New York City. We know that Paul's early advisor, Wilfred Conroe, was quite close with Zabriskie. Conroe was a Princeton University graduate and was really an important figure in the New York art world. He served as the vice president of the Artist Professional League. He lived above Carnegie Hall. How cool is that? And he operated a successful portrait studio. During the summers, he lived in Hendersonville, and he met Paul Whitener at a 1940 exhibition opening in Asheville. 4 years later, when he was back in New York City, Wilfred Conroe painted this portrait of George A. Zabriskie, which is now in the collection of the New York Historical Society. And at that time, Zabriskie was the president of the board of the New York Historical Society. So that gives a little bit of a sense of the connections between Paul Whitener here in Hickory, Conroe coming to North Carolina, Zabriskie being a mover and shaker in the museum world, and connecting with our own Wilfred Conroe, who was such an important part of the museum's history. So Whitener would have been well aware of Zabriskie's art collection, and he was encouraged to travel from Hickory to the Big Apple to participate in an auction at the Coleman Auction Galleries, the sale of Zabriskie's collection of paintings. There were some barriers, though, that stood between Paul and the opportunity to secure this bounty of great art. And we're going to talk a little bit about them. Not surprisingly, one of the biggest challenges people usually face is what? Money. So, next slide, please. Paul did what every smart and enterprising museum director does when they face an insurmountable challenge. He enlisted the support of his board. And here you can see some letterhead from 1951, and the name that is circled there is Hickory native and local entrepreneur Laura Lee Wilfong. And we can go ahead to the next slide and actually see Laura Lee Wilfong in a beautiful painting that was completed by Paul Whitener. And people say Paul Whitener's sitters come alive on the canvas, and that's certainly reflected here. I had some fun connecting with people prior to this program, and I got to meet Ida, Laura's daughter. We had a fun set of exchanges and conversations leading up to this evening, and she's the one that provided me these images. So here we can learn a little bit more about Laura Lee Baker. She was a 1927 Lenoir-Rhyne graduate, and she was the wife of Brian Wilfong, who she appears next to right here on this slide. She started her flower arrangement business in her kitchen. And when she was talking about, she gave an article to the Hickory Daily Record in 1967 about her businesses. She said, "I had always loved flowers. I thought about this business of fixing arrangements to sell, and I told myself that I could do that. So I did. I started selling to my friends, but word got around and business picked up. There wasn't room in the refrigerator for both food and flowers, so the food had to go." And this story of her meteoric rise was confirmed by her daughter Ida when we had a conversation about the early days of the business. So in 1935, Wilfong Florist Incorporated and moved next door to the family home. In her own words, Wilfong described, "The first year I spent more than I made, but my husband supplemented me with his earnings as a city letter carrier. After that, I always made my salary and a little bit of profit on top of it." She had some babies, and in 1948, she established Hickory Wholesale Florists as a practical alternative to getting flowers from elsewhere, and the business was also very successful. So Laura Lee was the proprietor of Wilfong's Florist from 1935 until her retirement in 1968. Her husband Brian kept working as a mail carrier and also as the bookkeeper for the floral business. It's really neat to see Laura Lee and Brian here together, especially because Ida described their joyful and tender collaboration and the love that they shared working together. She also described that Laura Lee Wilfong was the type of person that would have done anything to see Paul Whitener be successful. It is known that they housed some artists when they would come for visits to Hickory to see Paul. And I can't help but wonder if this portrait of Brian by Wilfred Conroe dates to one of those visits. Next slide, please. Having heard a little bit more about Laura Lee Wilfong, it's not surprising then that when Paul Whitener said, "I don't have a collection fund yet," she stepped forward to loan him $1,000 to grow our collection. That's the equivalent of about 9,000 of today's dollars. But Paul still had one other hurdle to overcome. How the heck was he going to get the paintings from New York City back to Hickory? So after he had his money, Paul famously asked to borrow the Wilfong station wagon to haul the paintings back home. This story has become part of the doctrine of Hickory Museum of Art, and connecting with Ida allowed me to ask a question that has been burning on people's minds around this whole story, and that is, what kind of station wagon was it? So here it is. You get to see it was a green Dodge 1954 straight gear 2-door sedan. Ida told me Paul's was completely green. This one has a little bit of white trim on the top, and it is also the car that Ida learned how to drive on. There we go, back on. We have motion sensitive lights in this gallery. So up next, you'll see the bill of purchase from the Coleman Auction Gallery that outlines what Paul brought back in that station wagon. It's kind of neat to see. It's like a who's who of some of the best paintings in the museum's collection. And the painting that I'm sitting underneath here is really one of the stars of the show. And so we're going to take a look at that right now. And here is the artist that created it. His name is Thomas Cole, and you can see he lived from about 1800 to 1848. And this is a portrait that was done by Asher Brown Durand. And keep that name in mind because we're going to see some of Asher Durand's work in just a little bit. So Thomas Cole was in his mid-30s, and this was likely in the mid-1830s when this portrait of him was done. We can see the next slide. So here is the painting that Paul brought back from the Coleman auction of Zabrisky's art collection that now lives in our museum. It's simply called American Landscape. So it came with the title, and we didn't really have the date. And I'd be really curious to hear, for those who are on the call, what are some things that you notice about the picture that we're looking at?
Looks like the Smoky Mountains or the Blue Ridge Parkway.
Oh, well, I didn't catch that.
This is a look like the Blue Ridge Parkway.
It looked like the Blue Ridge Parkway, for sure. What makes you say that?
I noticed the river.
You know what?
The river.
The river, you notice the river right there? So it looks like the Blue Ridge Parkway with the big mountains, and you notice the river.
I noticed the cow on the bridge.
You notice a cow on the bridge?
Yeah.
Oh, good eyes. Have you seen this
Oh.
before? So here's the
I noticed the mountain.
You notice the mountain? Okay, well, what kind of day does this look like?
It looks like it's about to rain.
It looks like it's about to rain. What makes you say that?
Because it has big dark stormy clouds.
Okay. So far we have a river, mountains, big dark clouds that make it look like it's a rainy day. Okay, what time of the year do you think this is?
Fall.
Fall?
Fall.
What makes you say that?
Because of the leaves over there.
The leaves on the trees?
Yeah.
In the lower right corner makes you feel like it's the fall? Yeah. Well, autumn.
And Dad, I noticed all the trees.
You noticed all the trees in the front and right here?
Yeah.
Okay, good eyes. Well, autumn was actually Thomas Cole's favorite time of year. He said there was one season in the American forest that surpasses all the world in gorgeousness. It is the autumnal. Every hue or color is here. What colors do you see in the trees?
Gold.
It looks like he's on mute. They have this nice gold orange and that dark umber color in the leaves here. And it kind of is, it's very vibrant. It catches your eye.
Yeah, orange, red.
Orange and red? Those are great colors. So what else? One of our participants saw the cow on the bridge. And can you see, who is it looking over the kind of the barrier here? There's a man looking over the bridge, and here is a little house. If you look really closely in the lower right-hand corner, it's kind of tucked in there. You can see a house.
I can see it.
So the next slide may help us do that even more so. So here is a zoom in. And what are some more details that you start to notice when we're zoomed in like this?
Is that on the river?
Is it a ship?
Smokestack.
I see the ship, and I noticed the ship.
Yes.
I see grass.
You notice that there's the ship, and you see grass. So there is grass right here, and then there's the ship. Okay. So why do you think, so I guess a question that I would ask is, why do you think the artist would include all of this? Any thoughts?
To show man's impact on nature.
To show man's impact on nature? Spoken like the wife of an art historian. That's right. If you look, everything in nature is big, big, right? And then the details are tiny, tiny. And all the details that are there are kind of tucked into the landscape. You have to really look to find them. And Thomas Cole had been coming up to this landscape. We don't really have a secure date for this painting, but I think I figured out when it may have been made, and I'm going to share that with you tonight. Thomas Cole started painting the American landscape after moving to the United States from England in 1818. First he goes to the Ohio area, then he takes some classes in Pennsylvania where he works on his drawing, then he settles in New York City. And New York City at this time in the 1820s is actually a pretty bustling place. So he would escape to nature and he would paint up there in the Catskill Mountains and around the Catskill Creek. And a lot was happening during those early days. Tourism was beginning to start, and really, as somebody who came from England, he was concerned about this. He came from Lancashire, which was a factory town, and had found that the American landscape was beautiful. It was pristine, but that inroads were being made by man. And I think he has a little bit of a message for us around all of this. So my hunch is that this painting dates to the 1830s, and I'll show you why that is in just a second. But for now, I kind of want to talk a little bit about what is happening here. The boys recognize that there is a river in the back with a boat on it. And then up here, there's kind of a connector. And you have to think about American history at this time. The Erie Canal was being finished, and there were a bunch of little sub-canals, the New York Canal System, that was working to connect Catskill Creek to the Hudson River to the Erie Canal so that things could travel back and forth that were being traded. And Thomas Cole is really good at hiding things in the background and giving you hints about things that may have been happening that you might not have thought about initially when you look. So behind the boat, can you see in this detail the kind of plumes of smoke behind it at the base of the mountain? Look really, really close. Those were actually likely tanneries. And tanneries were, where leather was sent to be processed, softened, and colored. In order to have a tannery, you take the tannic acid from a tree. So a lot of trees were felled in order to do this. Tons and tons of trees. After that, the leather would be loaded onto the boat, and then down it would go through the Catskill Creek, like I said, to the Hudson River, to the Erie Canal. So in the 1830s, when Thomas Cole was likely painting it, this industry was booming. In fact, there were 10 tanneries, 16 grist mills, 26 sawmills, and also one brewery within 10 miles of where this painting is likely situated, around the Catskill Creek. Isn't that really interesting? So after you do your tannery, after you work all day, have a little drink at the brewery, watch everything go out for commerce, and then wake up and do it all again. But Thomas Cole is giving us some things to think about. One of the things that is so interesting to me about this is where are all the trees in this painting? They're all in the front, right? Along the riverbank, there's not a single tree to be had. And Thomas Cole at this time was thinking a lot about materialist, expansionist America. He said in his writings, the moral principle of the nation is lower than it formerly was. It is with sorrow that I anticipate the downfall of this Republican government. And he was thinking about commerce and the materialism that was pervasive at the time when he said that. And it's kind of a cautionary tale about morality in government that is kind of interesting against today's backdrop. And in 1836, Cole also complained about the copper-hearted barbarians who were cutting down all the trees down in the beautiful valley on which I had looked with such a loving eye. So he had a very poetic way of thinking about all this. And in a lot of ways, again, this is coming from his childhood in the factory towns of England. Growing up in Lancashire, his dad owned a factory and was kind of on the top of the food chain for how all that worked. And then by way of some bad business deals, his dad lost it all. And Thomas Cole ended up working on the factory floor. So I think what he's doing here is he's looking at what is happening in the landscape around us. He's giving some indications of how it's changing, but I think he's also, at this point in his life, trying to freeze time here, saying, okay, right now, things still fit. Nature is still the prevailing force that is happening around us. Let's try to keep it here. And he wasn't always that optimistic. I think what may have happened, every artist has bills that they need to pay, and people's outlooks changed a little bit about land. And I think Cole may have been trying to appease the people whose land this was, saying, yes, you can have your business, you can rent your property, but at the same time, again, let's keep it right here. So in a lot of regards, Thomas Cole was really our first green artist. And I think that that's really important to recognize. And I think his paintings may have had an influence in Durand's as well, because New York State was actually the first state in the Union to include forestry goals in its constitution. This happened in 1894, but with paintings like these coming out of the 1830s, there is a good chance that that may have had a little bit of an influence, right? Celebrating this that way. Debbie, if you could show the next slide. So 1830, how did we get to that date? This is a pretty unique painting for Cole. He doesn't normally show inroads of man like this. His earlier paintings were pure, wild landscapes, the primordial kind of land before time, New Eden of America. But like I said, in the 1830s, people's outlook, especially the landowners who would be purchasing these paintings, changed a little bit. And this painting, to my eye, recalls this painting from the MFA in Boston. If you look, there's a little man in the foreground, and if you look in the middle ground, there's the train rolling along past a few tiny little houses. But again, we have that panoramic vista of America. And again, it is, like I said, a much more optimistic view. But like I said, at the time, the people buying these paintings were growing a little bit more optimistic about profiting off of the land. So that kind of, I think, solves that mystery. And I think sometime soon, we may have some new label copy around this painting to kind of round out the story a little bit more and let people know some of the things that may have been happening at this time. So does anybody have any questions about the Thomas Cole? What do you think? We like this painting? Raise a glass if you do. Okay, right on. Are we ready to take a look at another painting? Well, if so, first we'll show you again the person that created it. So there's a Cole, kind of comparing back to that last painting, and then one more slide ahead. Here is Asher Durand. So this was the guy that painted Thomas Cole's portrait. And here is Asher Durand doing a self-portrait at right around that same time in the mid-1830s. And what is interesting about Asher Durand is he is actually the older of the two artists, but he lives a lot longer than Thomas Cole. Thomas Cole's birth and death age, you saw 1801 to 1848. He lived to be 47. Durand has a much longer life, and by way of that is able to kind of establish himself as the dean of American landscape painters. Debbie, if you could go ahead to the next slide. Him and Cole were really, really good friends, so it's only fitting to pair these two paintings together for our first cocktail together. And here you can see the tribute. I mentioned Thomas Cole died in 1848. His good friend Asher Durand painted him 1 year later, 1849, in a really touching tribute to his mentor and kind of collaborator. So Cole was the guy in the hat, and the other good-looking guy that he's standing with is William Cullen Bryant, the transcendentalist poet. And they're standing out on an escarpment that is most likely Catterskill Clove, which is where Thomas Cole's early Land Before Time type paintings were often situated. And can anybody see what Thomas Cole is holding in his hand? It's kind of jutting out over the rocks.
I think it's bamboo.
You think it's bamboo?
Yeah.
It does look like bamboo. It looks like it's kind of long and skinny and hollow. It is actually a recorder. So the instrument you play like this. And this is kind of gives a sense of how friendly Durand and Thomas Cole really were. They enjoyed painting together. They also enjoyed music together. And Asher Durand lovingly referred to Thomas Cole as C major and himself as D flat. So that's kind of him paying tribute to his good friend and the good times they had together. And now we can take a look at a little bit more of what D flat was doing before he started painting. So I mentioned Durand is the older of the two artists, even though he lives much longer than Thomas Cole. Durand didn't start painting until after his friendship with Cole. What he had been doing prior to that was engraving. And famously, Durand engraved the Declaration of Independence, which you may recognize from the $2 bill. So that gives a sense of the kind of technical ability that Durand brought eventually to his landscape painting, and is also just kind of neat to see. And it was actually, like I said, Cole was the one that said, it's time to stop the engraving thing. Let's start painting together. And Debbie's going to turn the lights back on for us, and I'm going to take a little sip. On top of that encouragement from Cole, it was also the painting that Asher Durand bought from Thomas Cole that made him think maybe this is a good thing for me to get into. So Thomas Cole began selling paintings by hanging 3 that he did up in Catterskill Clove in the window of a shop in New York City. The first person to buy one was John Trumbull, the guy who did the painting of the Declaration of Independence that Durand engraved in the picture that we're looking at. The next person in line to snatch one of those paintings up was actually Asher Durand. And by way of that, that's how the friendship initiated. So here we can see in the next slide, the pastoral landscape that Asher Durand painted that is in our collection. So spend a couple seconds taking it in. And I'll ask, I won't be able to point to it even though it's tiny because it's actually right over there in our gallery, but you can see it on your screen. What are some things that you notice about this one?
There's a child in the picture with the mother.
There's a child right there with the mother, right? What do they appear to be doing?
Picking blackberries, maybe?
Picking blackberries, doing something digging. Does it seem like a stressful day?
No.
No.
Dad,
Yeah.
I see animals
You see animals?
Yeah.
Where do you see them?
over by the river.
Over by
I
the
think
river.
they're cows, and I think they're getting a drink.
Yeah, so it looks like there's cows taking a drink, and Debbie, if you want to go to the next slide, we can zoom in a little bit more closely and get
Oh,
a picture of them. So you can see it, we have the mother and child with the cows. Cows are taking a drink, mother and child appear to be having fun. Should we zoom back out a little bit? What are some other things that you see in this picture?
What else do you see?
Oh, I see a tree.
You see a tree? How many trees do you see?
A little one and a big one.
A little one and a big one, yep, so those two right in the front kind of point in different directions. And then there's one behind and then a nice little row of trees. Everything appears to be nice and orderly.
And then I see one more.
What now?
And then I saw one more.
He saw one more. He saw one more tree.
One more, I think he said.
Oh, one more. Yeah, there are a bunch back there. And so I
I
put
see
this,
a ton back there.
yeah. Okay. Well, I put these two pictures together so that we can begin to compare and contrast a little bit between Thomas Cole and Asher Duran. So I'll start by asking, how do you think these two, what similarities do you notice?
Say that again.
What similarities do you notice in these paintings?
That there's lakes.
That there's bodies of water, yep, lakes and rivers, okay?
I see. And there's both animals in each picture.
There's animals in each picture. There's the little cows in the Thomas Cole, the tiny little ones, and then there are the big ones that are kind of more detailed in the
And
Asher.
there's a lot of trees.
And there's more trees for sure in the Asher Duran, okay? What do you think is different about these two paintings?
Because one has roots in them.
One has roots in them, Debbie, can you go there?
Did you see them over by the tree?
Yeah, so there are roots in these trees, and there's certainly, you can't see any roots in Thomas Cole's trees, okay?
But I saw roots in the other pictures sticking
I
up.
think too, Asher Duran's painting looks like summer.
Okay, Asher Duran's painting looks like summer, where Thomas Cole's looks more like autumn. Everything is in bloom in
Yeah.
Asher Duran's paintings, where Thomas Cole is the fall. Which day would you like out in nature?
Dad, I see roots sticking up in the picture with the animals taking a drink.
Okay, yeah, there are roots sticking up in the animals taking a drink, so there's a lot of detail in Asher Duran. If you had to choose a day to be walking in the wilderness, would you take Asher Duran or Thomas Cole?
I think Ashland.
You do Asher Duran. I do Cole. I like the fall
Okay,
mountains.
I like the summer.
so some folks would rather be out in the rain and in the cold in the autumn than the Thomas Cole. And Asher Duran kind of gives a warm, even light. Like you said, it feels like summer. And things appear to be in harmony, don't they? The cows have everything they need. The people are having fun. And my hunch is that these folks may actually be from Europe. If you take a look at their clothes, they have kind of an Italianite Swiss look to them. And my hunch for this one is that it probably dates to around 1840. And again, a lot of these paintings, you can see the bill of sale, that slide we looked at before. Basically, this is this right here that we looked at earlier. The bill of sale from the Coleman Auction House gives us titles, and it gives us names of artists. It gives us prices, which are kind of laughable now, this many years later. But it doesn't give you the dates or a lot of information about the pictures. And so, you have to do a little bit of digging, and you have to learn a little bit about them, look at them, look for clues to begin to piece together when they might be from and where they might be from. And in this instance, like I said, my hunch is this is 1840. Durand goes on a trip with another great landscape painter named John Frederick Kensett to Europe. And he goes through Switzerland and goes through Italy. And I've always thought that this painting must derive from that. So one other thing to think about with the difference between Thomas Cole and Asher Durand is the degree of detail. And I know Mike Kevin was really, really excited about the roots in the foreground. But if you look really closely, I wanted to zoom in, you can also see the bark on the tree, and especially the one that is right behind what appears to be the big oak, which is usually right in the center of Durand's paintings. He gives you so much detail, you can begin to guess it's probably a silver beech tree. And then there's the big rock that the woman is sitting beside, probably some form of quartzite. And again, this is kind of the difference between Cole and Durand. If we go back to the comparison slide, where the two are side by side, you can see Cole's trees, they're trees, and they're autumn, they're there. But Durand's trees are species. And similarly, the rock is a rock that you can begin to try to identify. And that speaks into kind of how tastes change over time. Cole was very much a romantic painter, more about the feeling of landscape. And Durand, a generation later, is much more dialed in to science, nature, and geology. So you can even begin, like I said, to get down and see the moss that grows underneath. Every single detail, every leaf is a leaf with light shining through it. So it's just, again, it gives a sense of how two different landscape painters who were closely related to one another can work in somewhat similar styles and do things a little bit differently. One of the other things, when you're looking at Durand and you're looking at Cole, Durand is usually vertical and Cole is usually horizontal. The effect that gives you, this is a sweeping panorama, a grand nature, and with the Durand, it's a much more intimate view. It's you're looking in on a moment, a pastoral moment, where nature and human beings and animals are all kind of in harmony in a warm, idyllic sense. And I think Durand, compared to Cole, we mentioned when Cole shows nature and people in harmony, and there's industry involved, that may be more of an affectation. Durand was much more optimistic in his thinking about the relationship between man and landscape, and there's kind of a warmth and sincerity that was also reflected in his personality, where people kind of remarked what a jovial person he was, despite the fact that his wife, mother died within a couple months of one another, right around this time. And he, as a widower, found himself with 3 children, but still was able to use his talent, his expertise to get to Europe, to continue to work, and continue to pay the bills and just be prosperous for a long time to come. And lastly, I would say that Durand was also one of the founding members of the National Academy of Design and became its president, was the president for a really long time. And a lot of the other paintings that surround me here all have that National Academy of Design imprimatur, or the credibility that comes with being in the National Academy of Design. So next week, I hope that you will come and learn some more about some of the other paintings in the gallery. And next week, we're also going to learn a little bit more about Mr. Zabriskie with a different drink together. And I'll ask if anybody has any questions, or if not, I will look forward to seeing you next Thursday.
We
Dad,
look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. It was good to see you.
Dad,
Yeah?
it was fun answering.
Who's not answering?
He said it was fun.
Oh, it was fun answering? Okay, we'll do it that way again next week.
Yeah,
Yeah?
yeah, I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, I'll see you at home. And I'm gonna see you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.